And it was designed to really turn people into workers and flatten the differences between folks. And no, we just live in a totally different time, but school really hasn't kept up, especially the public school system. And I would say a lot of private schools look pretty similar to public schools at this point in that way. And I think a lot of the ecosystem that's been created and the culture that is around schools really hasn't changed. There's bright spots. There's good people doing good stuff like you and a bunch of other folks. But I think the culture of education is one that's deeply resistant to change. And so you have to really think about what are the underlying causes of that. And a lot of that is just that, like, public education is a very top-down system. It's very much we built the building, you live in the neighborhood, you go to that school because we need you to go to that school, right?
Mm.
The school is operated with like layers and layers and layers of bureaucracy that are kind of pushed down from all the way from the feds down to the state, down to the district, down to the principal, down to the teacher. And so, you look at that, and that's just not a very empowering system for anybody involved, in my mind.
Yeah.
And it makes sense why I was pretty miserable as a teacher, and why a lot of people I know have been pretty miserable as teachers. And so I think that those things, when you put them all together, and then you insert, the kind of monopoly that it has on our imagination, it makes it really hard for people to envision, like, well, what else is possible? What else could we do differently? And I love doing that, but I'll be the first to say I went to a very traditional public school. I went to 30 kids in a class, grade, letter of grades, all the stuff, not project based. And I struggled when I got into the real world because it just didn't really prepare me when I got to college. And I think a lot of that is that we're unwilling to give people permission to try things in education because we've developed this very rigid set of structures that everybody has to live within. You must do the lesson this way. You must do the IEPs this way. You must, it's process, process, process. Like the public systems love process. They don't care much about outcomes. They love process. And I think that's that's the opposite of how really robust, innovative marketplaces for education look, right? Where families have lots of choices and lots of things, and people are trying new things and experimenting, and a lot of stuff doesn't work. That's really the opposite of what the public system is designed for. You got to go through, you got to write 6 TPS reports to try anything in your classroom or try anything in a school, and you got to ask 5 different groups of people and get permission, and then make sure that
so many hoops.